Hi everybody, how you doing? It's Monday and another week of sports, and so another week of Moohead Radio. I'm your host, the Big and Furry Bovine. Joining me, hey, we got a couple of good guys here. We've got Derek Frisbee from DF Sports, and we've got Brian from out in Arizona, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff that's going on. And, Brian definitely wanted this next story to be the lead story, which we've said so much over the years. Barkevious Mingo, the Browns' former first-round pick who has floated around the league, has been accused of sex crime involving a child. So, Brian, what is it you want to say about this?
Well, number one, that the Cleveland Browns radio or the Cleveland Browns Daily Show wouldn't touch this with a 500-foot pole. Everywhere else that I've seen this story listed, he is not only linked to the Browns, he is pictured wearing a Browns uniform on the field. So, whether we want him to be a member of the Browns or not, in the media's mind, he's a Cleveland Brown. We brought him into the league, so we're stuck with him.
Well, you know what it's a lot like, and I'm not comparing, obviously, criminal records at this point, but if you're Darko Milicic and you were selected number 2 in the draft, and God only knows you ended up going to Detroit, and, when the other great players around you went someplace else, guys like D. Wade and all of them, Barkevious Mingo went high to the Browns and never really panned out anywhere he went. And he went to some good football teams. The thing that's really not known about this, I mean, obviously, he turned himself in. According to sources, this charge is 2 years old, and which might or might not be older than the child that he's accused of molesting. We do not know. We do not have any, what has been said is that they're not pushing it further because of the age of the victim. So that would tell me that the child is of age of consciousness as far as what's going on around, and they want to protect the child, which is a good thing if something actually did happen. Barkevious Mingo's attorney, who really should be waiting for facts to emerge, is kind of talking a lot right now. The main thing that he's talking about is, and I see Tony is jumping in here, and maybe we can add him to the stream. Hi, Tony. How you doing?
Are we talking about Jamie Lee Curtis's, her favorite yogurt, pedophilia?
Well, we don't know that this is true, okay? And this is, our society is innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, I just tend to, when it becomes child porn and all that stuff, I tend to lean on the guilty towards proven innocent side.
Well, I mean, I think everybody, it's kind of like, a paternal suit. Do you ever really win in a situation like that?
True.
The publicity that comes out initially is so negative that, and I'm not protecting Barkevious Mingo by a long shot, but the odd part about this is that he currently is playing, well, he was playing for the Atlanta Falcons, who let him go. As soon as they found out about the charge, instead of taking the usual tack that professional organizations will take, which is, we are collecting facts, we are aware of the accusations, and we are looking into this, they just immediately dumped him.
Well, I can tell you, my mom started working for Home Depot when Arthur Blank was still one of the co-owners. And I can tell you that any child activity of any kind, that was an automatic, you were gone. It didn't matter what the state laws were or whatever. So that was a zeroth policy.
You can sue the Pope for bastardly. I mean, anyone can sue anybody for anything. It doesn't make it so. Here's what the attorney is saying. We are extremely disappointed in the Atlanta Falcons' rush to judgment in terminating Mingo's contract before gathering all the relevant facts and prior to my client having his day in court. That's his lead counsel, Mingo's lead counsel, Chris Lewis. said to Adam Schefter, so these are good sources, the accusation against Mr. Mingo is a lie. Barkevious knows it, and so does his accuser. All right, and we don't even know who the accuser is. All we know is that the charge is younger than 17 years of age. The warrant obtained by ESPN details the allegations by a then 13-year-old boy who says Mingo pulled at his underwear and touched him inappropriately in July of 2019. The boy says he and a friend were staying at a hotel with Mingo after a trip to an amusement park and restaurant, according to the warrant. All right, so, let me say this, and I'll leave it at this because I have nothing to enlighten anybody about the veracity of these charges. But if this is true, it's not the first case. In other words, these things run in clusters, and somebody who has a legitimate pedophilia issue is not likely to be a one-time, one-and-done individual. It is usually a serial kind of thing that happens over and over, and they literally can't control themselves. They're sick people. So it'll be interesting in the days to come if anybody else steps up and makes the same claim.
Well, and this is also something that's carried forward. So some type of incident like this could have happened to him when he was roughly that age or younger.
Yeah. I mean, and again,
so
the thing is, it's athletes get drafted and get picked high, and in football, and basketball both, it is a very focused fishbowl. When you are, somebody like the guy who the Cavaliers drafted out of Canada, what was that kid's name?
Anthony Bennett,
and you go one overall and you were a running rebel and and then all of a sudden from UNLV to the pros, and you just never panned out. You're going to hear about that for the rest of your life. That's just the way it works out because it's a fishbowl. Baseball's different. You have a lot of guys who were drafted in the first round who never even, who never made it out of the minor league systems. And you hear about them all the time. But because there's so many picks in baseball, there isn't that fishbowl. But Barkevious Mingo will forever be one of those guys who underperformed. And that is the unfortunate reality. His talent, his physicality, his speed, all of those things kept him in the league, and teams kept giving him an opportunity, but he just never really stuck anywhere. So, and Wolfgar is bringing up an interesting comment here in the chat room. Watson has over 20 accusers and nothing happens. Mingo and Trevor Bauer are immediately dismissed. Well, Bauer has not been dismissed. Let's be careful of the language we use. He is being paid by the Dodgers. He's on administrative leave, which is somewhere in an in-between land. He's kind of in a position where the team is collecting its resources and trying to figure out what happened. And, that's a really weird story where it is consensual, but whether the party involved, female party, is mentally capable of making that kind of a decision, and what her past is and her past mental health could all come into play. These accusations, Deshaun Watson, as an example, I don't know what's happening with that, except that they're still putting together a case, I imagine, because they have all these people and they've got to get testimony. And some of the testimony is going to be one way and some of it's going to be unbelievable. Some of the people are going to be hopping on for publicity. And it's hard to say, again, how long it takes to really put together a case like that. But
the bigger issue is the backlog with the court system because of 2020.
That's a good point. That's a real good point. And the other thing that I think is unfortunate and it's sociological is that if you say he was with a massage therapist. That immediately will give people pause. It's like, well, what's the story here? Deshaun's getting a massage from who and why, and were they aware of what was going to go on beforehand? You say child abuse, you say sexual child abuse. And at that point, there is no question about a potential victim. In other words, you can't say, well, the kid was wearing this and was asking for it. There's none of that.
Well, and also,
go ahead.
As horrible as it is, position and importance does play a factor here. The Texans aren't just going to let Deshaun Watson go. It's a little bit different with Mingo. He's bounced around the league. He's not exactly the highest of positions. And not that it should matter. If you did something horrible, you should be cut regardless. Yeah. But the reality of the situation is they're not just going to let Deshaun Watson walk just because X amount of accusers said something. They're going to try to at least figure it out. And if it comes to that, well, then, that's what's going to happen.
But you don't lose a quarterback. I mean, the scary part of it is how important you are to the team has a lot to do with how the team reacts. If you're Barkevious Mingo, nobody cares. In Amsterdam, you've redeemed yourself as being the sickest person in the chat room. But hey, there is something, I think that's kind of funny in a sick, kind of twisted way. So you're back in good graces. Oh my God. Again, we all know there is unequal justice in this country. We've seen it, that fame and money has its place in jurisdiction, and that is unfortunate. And in judicial cases, it shouldn't be that way. It just is. Here's another story, getting away from this sordid one, because we only have I only got 45 minutes today to go through all of this. There is a story out that I found very interesting about Ben Roethlisberger, and I wanted to go from the potential child sexual abuser to the woman rapist who drags women into men's rooms by her feet. The rumor is that Ben Roethlisberger was tipping plays pre-snap during the course of the entire season, and that this had been figured out. This is really strange.
It had to do with his left heel.
That's correct. And the thing that's interesting about it, the theory is that when his left foot is raised off its heel, the play is going to be a pass. When he's flat-footed, it's going to be a run. They allege during the whole season, they did a study at SteelersDepot.com, and the tip holds water 95% of the time on shotgun run plays and almost 90% on passes. That means that he's doing it 90% of the time he's going to throw the ball. The website claims that when variance occurs and the tell fails, the plays often turned out being trick plays like jet sweeps, shovel passes, and screen plays, and all the non-conventional stuff. The other thing that's interesting is that when Mason Rudolph was studied, they couldn't find a brain. No. When Mason Rudolph was studied, he had a similar
tip. Only had a brain.
He had a similar tip on pass plays, but not so much on runs. So it's interesting. Is this particular footwork tick, for a lack of a better word, from Roethlisberger, part of what Washington's defensive players were talking about when they claimed Baltimore exposed some things during the Steelers' last win of their 11-0 start in 2020. I find it interesting that, the thing with Roethlisberger is he had to get rid of the ball so quickly anyway. I think it made a whole hell of a lot of difference. But I've never heard of something, and the fact that it was a Steelers site that is saying that it's 90% accurate based on study of game films, that's interesting. And obviously that's been brought to light. And if you're the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're going to be in a little hot water right now.
Well, remember, he was replaced.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you'd replace him too. I don't think that he should play another year, but it makes very little difference. I guess everybody wants to stay in the game
Well,
as
I
long
would
as
say
they
it makes a
can.
giant difference for the Browns.
Well, not if
Getting
he's
to
going to
play
play
them
like
twice.
that. If he's going to play like that, it doesn't make any difference because he's just throwing the ball up in the air and God knows who he's throwing it to. He was throwing like somebody who has nerve damage in his throwing arm. It was like not only was there no touch and feel, but there was the depth, the length of the pass and the feel and the touch wasn't there. And he was just throwing it up in the air like a blimp into the hands of the Browns. And Rudolph never surprises me. They wouldn't let him play in any reindeer games. And so fuck Mason Rudolph. That's what I think about him. But, I think that there's at least
Well, he's no
something.
Valentino.
There might be something to this. And the reason I say it doesn't really, I was watching the Indians play. And Swervin Irvin Santana, the former pitcher for the Angels and Twins, Tony knows Irvin Santana real well.
Sure do.
He no-hit the Indians back when he was an Angel. Back, I believe, my goodness, it was all the way back in 2011 that happened. And he comes into the game pitching relief, and he's at the bottom of the relief roster in Kansas City, who has the worst bullpen that you've ever seen in your life. He's 38 years old, and he proceeds to give up gopher balls, man. I mean, Roberto Perez takes him deep. I mean, everybody was hammering this guy. And you say to yourself, that's the last we're going to see of Irvin Santana. He's going to be let go. But at 38 years of age, his slider has no bite. He's lost velocity. And he's afraid to throw the ball anywhere near the plate because everything's getting rocketed. There comes a point when you have to leave the game, and usually it's the team that tells you. It's not the player himself. So, Ben Roethlisberger's not going to leave because he wants to atone for what happened last year. But the bottom line is that it's only going to be a longer year this year. 17 games is longer. And I don't think anybody's looking at the Steelers as being a playoff team, but even if they were to become a playoff team, it's even longer. And you saw what happened. The Steelers kind of held the ship together early on and had that good early record, and the wheels came off. And that's probably about the time the wheels came off Roethlisberger. And what are they going to do, Wolfgar? They're going to try to get a quarterback, and they don't have one right now. And they're trying whatever stopgap measures they can. But they're in a situation where losing becomes the smartest thing to do. The faster you lose and the more you lose, the better off you are of getting the draft pick that you need to get a quarterback. And the problem with the Steelers is when they got Roethlisberger from Miami of Ohio, if you remember, they already had a mature offensive line that was cohesive. That's not the case with the Steelers today. Any young
Jerome
quarterback.
They also had Jerome Bettis at fucking running back, one of the best in the
battering
game.
ram. Yeah. So, right off the bat, you say to yourself, any young quarterback who comes in there is not going to be protected. So that becomes a problem, too. And you're going to see that with Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. You're going to see it everywhere that a team that's a poor team, like you've seen with the Browns. It turns out Deshaun Kaiser couldn't play quarterback anywhere. Johnny Manziel couldn't play quarterback anywhere. All these things were kind of obvious over time. But when you look at the players and you say, well, what chance would any good quarterback have playing behind the line and the fools and the offensive coordinators and the bums that the Browns had back then? How many would have succeeded? And it's a damn good question. I don't have the answer to it.
The problem with the Steelers is their belief is that Dwayne Haskins is going to be the guy. They keep saying he looks good in practice.
Yeah.
Well, exactly what you said. When Dwayne Haskins came out of Ohio State, he only started for, I believe, a full year. And in college football, the elite run the show. He had a great O-line. So he comes into Washington, nothing but problems, undisciplined. And he comes to Pittsburgh now. And sure, maybe sitting will be a good thing for him. But what happens when he does get the chance? He's not going to be protected. What do you think that's going to affect his decision making? It's going to be the
Well,
same.
yeah, well, and that's the problem. I mean, Haskins' biggest problem, we know, is that he airs the ball out. He puts it up and he turns it over an inordinate amount of times. He throws a lot of interceptions, and a lot of quarterbacks need what Baker Mayfield got, which is the hard, cold lesson coming into a big boy league where you wear your big boy pants is that you ain't no goddamn boola boola, Harry High School hero anymore off the college campus. You're not that. You're just another guy trying to make it in the pros, and your arm cannot be so strong that you can throw through people if there just isn't the window and the requisite accuracy to do that, and if you don't have time. If you're going to try to force big plays down the field, it doesn't work. You have to learn a scheme. You got to be able to read defenses, and you've got to be able to be decisive. And instead of waiting and then rolling out to the right every time, you cannot fall into a pattern. And what happened to Baker in his second year is that once they saw that was the default, if you could get him running out of the pocket to the right, he was going to not get his shoulders squared. His accuracy went away. The strength of his arm went away going that direction because he wasn't planting his feet properly, and the ball was up for grabs. So,
And so much of that was mental with Baker too, and I think you see that now from 2019 to 2020. The mental problems stopped at a certain point in this past season because even early on, there was guys running wide open, and I remember specifically in the Ravens game, the first game of the year, I remember it was a rollout play. He had Higgins open, shorter, Beckham was open, and I want to say maybe Njoku or somebody. And he just didn't throw it because he had that mental block. He just didn't trust himself because he beat himself so much the year before. Now he's over that. He's learned that lesson. And I think from here on, he really, I think 2019 was the best thing to ever happen to him. I really do.
well, I'll say something else. I mean, when you're the guy who has the ball in his hands on every play, you've got to be very, very specific about what you're doing with the ball, and you've got to be decisive. And with Baker, we saw way too much double clutching in 2019. There was, do I trust what I see? And the tendency of his ego coming out of college and being big man on campus, wanting to go with the big yardage rather than with the safe check down. And then the offense didn't help when they started going 4 deep and then the receivers weren't coming back to him. Then he was just throwing the ball into a crowded secondary at that point. I think that this scheme, that Stefanski has put in is the best thing because we know Baker can throw a deep ball, but it's not what you live on. What you live on is that mid-range pass, getting first downs, moving the ball, loosening up the defense with the run, and then opening available big plays.
And also with another thing with Baker is he's changed how he's responded to criticism. So before he was responding verbally and, clapping back, whether if it be Twitter or in press conferences. Now he's doing it by training and stuff like that. And you can see that physically. He's seeing this stuff. I just saw, I forget who posted it or who noticed it. Baker's one of his most liked tweets or most recent liked tweets rather was the whole, if the Browns extend Baker, they're, tying themselves to mediocrity. I love that. I cannot tell you how much I love that from Baker. He sees that, and instead of saying, verbally, hey, F you, or whatever, like he used to do, he's now taking that internally and using that, in training or on the field. Like, okay, you think they're tying me to mediocrity. You think I can't get here? Well, let me show you. So he's evolved that way, and I think that's the best thing for him and for the Browns, obviously, long term.
I mean, you take a look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes could have ended up quarterbacking anywhere, I suppose. But, when you're surrounded by really fast wide receivers and you've got a coaching staff that runs a scheme that really utilizes the field east to west and north to south, he's got all those options and he's elusive and he's found himself in the right place at the right time. I think that, all of these quarterbacks, it's like this doom to mediocrity bullshit that we hear. What is mediocrity? The fact is, there's only one story, and taking health out of the equation. All right. I don't know how healthy Baker's going to be, how healthy Chubb's going to be. I don't know any of the, I don't have no idea. But if you take injuries and the unpredictable factors out of the equation, and you just look at this and say, what is the big story? The big story is when Jadeveon Clowney hits the field along with, Myles Garrett, when the interior defensive line picture is solidified, when the rookies in the line, in the secondary get their opportunity, and guys who are second-year players who didn't have an opportunity to play, and we start seeing what kind of depth we have, the big picture of this whole thing rests on the defense, because we know what the offense can do, and the offense should be better only because the players are more familiar with it. And, and the coaching staff is a little bit more aware of what Baker does well and what the receivers do well. And they have an opportunity in a camp to work and fine tune those things and not have to worry about coming into preseason games and all that kind of crap, having to play somebody and getting them hurt. You start the season, you hit the ground running. The big question is going to be, if this defense steps up, you're going to have other shifts within the organization. I guarantee you, if the Browns defense, because of these acquisitions, suddenly becomes a better and very competitive defense, that somebody's going to come after Joe Woods as a head coach.
Yeah.
Every year this happens in the NFL. That's why Glanville stands for not for long, because every coach is one season away. If you remember, 2007 with the Browns, that was the 10-6 year with Derek Anderson, right? Mm-hmm. And Rob Chudzinski was the head coach. And Chudzinski actually got to, and it's amazing how we don't remember this shit. He interviewed for the head coaching job of the Ravens, and Harbaugh got it, okay? That's how highly Chudzinski was thought of in 2007. All it took was 1 year. Chudzinski was gone, Crennel was gone, Derek Anderson turned out to be just a puff of smoke. And I was reading about Derek Anderson. The rest of his career after that, he had 9 more seasons that he was going to play in the NFL, and he would only start 15 games, and he was 4-11 in them.
By the way, Alex Van Pelt, same thing. If Kevin Stefanski hands over some of the play calling to him, teams are really going to look at that, because you consider the playoff game and what the offense did there. If he can, keep going with that, he's going to get some calls too.
Yes, I think it's worth signing him long term. Again, getting cold feet is not an unusual thing for anybody when it comes to a financial commitment of that size. But if you look at the near-term future, what do you have that's better? Right now, you don't even have, in my estimation, in Case Keenum, a backup quarterback who's capable of getting you into the playoffs, let alone deep into the playoffs. All right.
And look at how many quarterbacks bust.
Yeah. I mean, there is, at this point, if you have a system and you have people who believe in the system, it was a lot like Bernie Kosar. We look back with all kind of romantic haze over the Browns, where they started in 1985, and then in 1986 with the big win against the Jets in the playoffs, where they had to come back from 21-10 down. You look at that and you say, oh, it's all big romantic haze. Bernie Kosar was a 86.4, 87 quarterback rating guy for his career. He didn't throw a lot of interceptions because he was very accurate, but at the same time, he really didn't make plays with his feet at all. He was a heady quarterback. But by today's standards, Bernie Kosar would not be considered in the top flight of NFL quarterbacks. He would be of course, a step ahead of the Ryan Fitzpatrick types, but he would be well below, the guys who are, we don't even mention Tom Brady, but the younger crop. But the fact is, we had a good team surrounding him, and we had a window, and that window, it went away when Belichick came to town and decided that Bernie had diminished skills. That was the end of that.
Well, and that he was also calling his own plays. He wasn't running the Bill Belichick offense.
And also, you can argue right now, out of all the quarterbacks currently in the AFC North, they're all pretty talented. I mean, I don't consider Ben a quarterback in the AFC North anymore. I just think, his time is up. But when you look at the three with Baker, Lamar, and Burrow, Baker might not be the best overall, but I think you can easily argue, and I think it would be correct to say that Baker has the best arm in the AFC North. And you have to keep that around when you're playing in Cleveland. You have to have a guy who's got a strong arm like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. And I guess I've been around long enough to know that you've got to be in position to get to the next position. You don't jump from being, a 4-12 football team. What you're doing is you're saying, gosh, if we could just become a 500 team. But when you do what the Browns did, you're saying, now we want to go deeper into the playoffs. We want to be able to win the division. We want to be able to have more home field advantage in the playoffs. And we want to be able to compete with the better teams because we will have a defense on the field that can actually hold them closer in the game. And we're not looking at creating a whole new offense that's explosive, like, throwing the ball to Tyreek Hill. That's not who we are and what we do. But we averaged a good number of points. We had a lot of games where we scored a lot of points. I don't think anybody should be disappointed in the offensive output of the Cleveland Browns. It was just the defense was so bad. That gets fixed. We go deeper. But, you're not going to get Tom Brady. You're not going to get a GOAT. We got a GOAT in LeBron James. We got lucky. GOATs are like Bill Russell. GOATs are like Larry Bird. GOATs are like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan. GOATs don't come around for but one team and a blue moon. And, if you think you can just go into the open market at a college and get somebody as good as Baker, who's as ready now emotionally and physically and mentally to play the game in a scheme, then I suppose you don't pay the man. I say you pay the man. I don't want.
And that's it right there. It's not all about, is he the best player? Is he the best player for your situation? The Browns right now have tied themselves to Kevin Stefanski, and Andrew Berry has done this with the scheme, even going back to Dorsey and going back to Sacha Brown. They've put this all together, and it's all fit now. We have a guy who fits the scheme perfectly. They brought in a bunch of offensive linemen who fit the scheme, and this is the plan. So you can't take out the main piece of the plan and expect to replace them with anybody.
Yeah, and again, that's true. Jim Brown. It's a once in a lifetime thing. So seeing Nick Chubb being as good as he is, it's like, wow, we may have hit pay dirt here. If he stays healthy, this guy is some kind of running back. He's special. He's so good that he makes Kareem Hunt look average. And Kareem Hunt is a really good running back. I mean, that's saying a hell of a lot. So, when you get an Eric Dickerson guy and a guy who can bust off big, long plays, it's that's a big deal. But you don't count on that. That's not a strategy. And, we're talking about, do you spend the money or you don't spend the money? And we're dealing with the Cleveland Indians, who are now at the halfway point of a season that's really over. And, a season is too long anyway. I mean, let's be honest. This should be the end of the regular season, and we should just be getting into baseball playoffs now, because there isn't much really to be interested in there, at least not for me. But the Indians now are going to be sellers, okay, in the cellar and sellers. And there is no reason for the Cleveland Indians to spend money when they know going into the second half of the year they're opening up with a horrible schedule against stronger competition, and their pitchers are not healthy, and they've got nothing. And you've got a guy in Cesar Hernandez who looks like he's got he's sold out completely to being a power hitter. So he's not making contact. He is making ridiculous base running decisions, and his defense is so inordinately poor, he's not even reaching his glove down to the ground to pick up ground balls. He's going to be gone, I guarantee you, because he's playing for a 2022 contract, and he's playing around with the launch angle. So he's hit 14 home runs, which is the most he's ever hit in his fucking career. And he's at the halfway point of a season. And some dumb team will pay him. I guarantee you they'll pay him big money in 2022. Get rid of him now. Eddie Rosario is going to do you no good, so get rid of him. And the Indians are just going to just save as much money as they can and then continue to get mediocre players in the future. So we see how this works in baseball. I don't want the Browns doing that shit in football. We've waited. The fan base has waited to get good, and we got good at a number of positions. And I think now we've gotten better at the defensive positions dramatically. So now this is not the time to take a half step or a full step back to save money. Fuck that shit. Jimmy Haslam saved up more money by not paying his clients the goddamn rebates that they had earned. We got plenty in the war chest, you know? Hey, Keyblade, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Been a while. Been a long time. I miss you so much.
Yeah, he was on the CBD show with us, with Tom and I. So,
and and we're talking about first round picks, and the Indians picked Gavin Williams, a pitcher. Guy's 6'6", 240 pounds, big guy, throws about 94 to 97, has hit 100 on a clock, but that, again, a radar clock, the radar can be a little bit favorable or unfavorable. But the thing that they like about this kid, he's a little older, which some teams didn't like. A lot of teams like to draft the high school guys, but Williams went 10-1. He struck out 130 and walked 21 in 81 innings. And that's from East Carolina University. He pitched very well against Vanderbilt, and he's got a strong arm, and he maintains his stuff. The issue, again, with picking up high school kids is that they almost invariably end up with arm trouble. We've got Tristan McKenzie, and the reason it's taken him this long to get up to the big leagues is because of arm trouble, and he's still not a ready for prime time player. But is Gavin Williams going to be a really good pitcher? I think it's more how these guys mentally adjust to playing in the big leagues, just like it is in football. The quarterbacks, it's how they adjust to realizing they're not the fastest guy in the field, unless you're Lamar Jackson, or that their arm strength can't carry them through every problem, that their receivers don't have 5-yard windows that they're pulling away from really lousy secondary players against second-rate college teams, that all of the guys in the NFL, except the guys who played in the Browns backfield last year, are going to be able to stay with receivers a lot closer.
Well, and the other thing is are they going to come across the Freddie Kitchens of pitching coaches that totally screw them up?
Well, I mean, you can make the argument that now that Sasquatch is back, but nobody's going to ask for Mickey Callaway back now. So, I mean, this, it's all about the Indians. In their first 3 rounds, they've picked all pitchers, and this is the way the Indians are going to do it. They're not going to pay money for primetime offensive players. They're going to try to grow pitchers down on the farm and just try to sneak through that way. That's just what they're doing. And they're sticking to their guns, and it makes for a very dull, lousy game. Inferior players. I mean, Ramirez, not Jose, but the other one, Harold, who can't field. He looks like Charlie Spikes. I don't know, but he can hit. He hits line drives, and he has a good bat. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get, instead of the 5-star players, you're going to get 2 stars. They can hit. And
it's a shame they can't have 9 DHs.
yeah, I mean, right now the Indians just don't have players. Bradley Zimmer is just a shell of what he was. Honest to God, you see him going after fly balls now, and he realizes that his life, that he's mortal, and all the injuries he's had. So it reminds me of Rocco Baldelli. I don't know if you remember when he was a player. It's the same kind of thing. These guys go at it really hard. Or Grady Sizemore would be another one. And they play themselves out of the league. The guy who was the Phillies guy, I forget his name, the guy who would run headfirst into anything. I'm not remembering his name. I think he was a left-handed guy. But he was like, Crash Craddock. I mean, he would just run into anything headfirst. It's too bad. The Indians don't have the caliber of players. Damn it, if you have the caliber of players that the Browns roster has, you don't take a backward step. Before we get out of here, so I can get in and do my exercise regimen before it gets dark outside and rains all over me, I just want to point something out. We have a tendency, again, to romanticize certain things. And the Los Angeles Angels pitcher / designated hitter Ohtani is nothing short of remarkable. And, my generation talked about Bo Jackson as being a fabulous, multi-sport athlete. Others talked about Deion Sanders being able to play 2 sports, but man, the thing was that Bo Jackson dominated. I mean, he was an all-star in baseball, and he was just a beast on a football field until he had that hip, necrology issue, which was really too bad. But Ohtani has been, he got 33 home runs. This guy's going to start the All-Star game and lead off. He's got blazing speed. He's got power. He had what's presumed to be a 563-foot home run. He hit one into the second deck in Seattle. For God's sakes, it's like this guy is, a modern-day Babe Ruth. And I'm not saying career stat-wise, but I'm saying two-way wise. You don't see that in the game now. You just don't see it. And it's something that should not be downplayed just because it's baseball or just because he plays for the Angels or whatever the case may be. It is a really compelling story. And it's the best thing that baseball has going for it, because baseball doesn't have a whole lot going for it. And especially with this whole thing with umpires, I can't begin to tell you how bad that's become. The play call on the Indians, the double play at third base where the umpire clearly didn't know the rules of the game, and Francona lost his mind. These guys calling timeout at the last second at the plate, and the umpire is, walking away when the pitcher's already in his motion, and calling balls irregularly in the strike zone, and it's getting worse. And it sucks. The game sucks. The game's in trouble. The game is not popular. Nobody comes to this program to hear me talk about baseball. All right. I got like 501 subscribers, small boutique program. But come football season, I get 1,500 viewers at one time watching, the halftime and postgame shows. So that's a decent, significant number for somebody who doesn't market the program. The interest is in football. The interest is in basketball. The interest is not in baseball. Take my word for it. And that's a huge, huge problem. Lenny Dykstra, thank you so much, Wolfgar. Thank you. And Tom, you were first.
He started off with the Mets.
Yeah.
He was on the 86 team with Kevin Mitchell.
Right. So, these guys tend to have short careers. What can I tell you? That's it.
Dykstra played for a long time. He played until he was like 37.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Grady Sizemore played too long. played too long. He was crippled by the time he was done. And,
Richie Sexton?
Bradley Zimmer looks crippled to me. He looks like a guy who's playing now at throttled speed because he's afraid. And his baseball swing, and I don't know, when he crashed into the wall with that shoulder and that whole thing went down, his swing has never been the same. His power is completely gone. He can't get his arms extended out. He can't drop his hands to get, to pull his hands in. His bat has none of the whip and bat speed that it used to have. He is nothing now. And it's sad because when he came up, man, yes, he always struck out a lot, but that ball jumped off the barrel of his bat. A lot like we're seeing with Bobby Bradley right now. Doesn't make contact all the time, but the ball really jumps off the bat. It's all gone for Bradley Zimmer, and it's really too bad. All right, everybody. That's it. Tax evasion is right. That Lenny Dykstra famous for his tax evasion.
Just
Thanks,
quickly before we get out of here.
Yes.
Since I think I've said 4 words on the show. How about Team USA fucking shitting
Losing Nigeria?
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone expected Nigeria to fall on their shield.
They just beat the shit out of Argentina too.
Well, you know what they say: sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. No, it's embarrassing to the program. It's great for Nigeria. I mean, that's the best thing since they struck oil there. I mean, that's big stuff. And give them credit. They have guys who are on NBA rosters, but they don't have big names. No. And that's something that's got to fuel the United States effort, because you can't be losing even in an exhibition game like that when you beat them by like 80 points X number of years ago. That's
see you on the replay, Key.
Yeah. So everybody, thanks a lot for tuning in to this edition of Moohead Radio. It's Monday. We'll be back Friday to talk more sports, and we'll see what happens then. I'm getting into my pool now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again Friday. Until then, hasta la vista, Pastor Heads. Good night.